I've been looking forward to this, Dr. Martell.
Please come in, Craig.
Craig, well, obviously we had a spirited conversation about geopolitics and Ukraine and China here with Eric earlier, and so I think this will be a lot of fun. To kind of start out with to kind of start sowing the seeds. I think that you really built up a lot of your career in the private sector, in Silicon Valley, in the tech industry out here,
AI, yeah.
and then now you're sort of taking your stab at serving our country as the CDAO of the Department of Defense. What drove your decision to do that?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of what you and Eric were talking about. It's being mission driven. So before joining LinkedIn, I was a professor at the Naval Postgraduate School. So I was, from 9/11 on, I sort of switched my academic career towards military things, and that was really meaningful to me. And then I went into industry. I was there for about 9 years, and I'll go back. And there's a real value to industry. There's an excitement about industry. There's work getting done there that's not getting done anywhere else, right? And I think that's both good and bad. But I also felt a mission, a lack of a mission. And if I'm really honest, I think it's Eric's fault. And I do, actually.
Hot take?
I do. I was feeling this need to be more mission driven, so I volunteered for Schmidt Futures. And the one and only thing I did for Schmidt Futures was help them evaluate the kind of person they want for this job. And so I was in this conversation. There was a couple of VPs from Google, some folks from Amazon, myself, and we were talking about what this job should look like. And then about 2 weeks later, I got an email from the Deputy Secretary of Defense asking me to apply. So I'm pretty sure the whole thing was set up to be a covert interview.
He had a large part. That's great for our country. I think one of the things that I'm really curious to get your thoughts on. You've been in the seat for
4 months.
4 months, so enough time to sort of
to not know what I'm doing. Yeah.
But obviously, I think the Department of Defense is a massive organization with a very broad mission set and an incredible complexity as an organization, and the mandate to try to figure out how to bring artificial intelligence to the department is incredibly broad and difficult mandate. I'm curious, how are you thinking of approaching that?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. So first of all, my role is really weird. So it's the largest organization in the world. I would argue probably the most heterogeneous organization in the world. And it's made up of genuine sovereigns that don't actually have to listen to one another. So there's a great deal of influence that has to happen in order to make this work. And I think it's wrong but my job is not just the chief AI officer. I'm also the chief data officer and the chief analytics officer. I think it's important to say that because the right way to approach this is on a hierarchy of needs. And I think you and your company are tackling it exactly the right way. We got to get the data right. And if we can get the data right, AI is going to come for free. And we can talk about why I think that. But AI over time is just going to happen in the department. I'm very confident about that. But it's not going to happen until we get the data layer right. So my real drive is about how do we find, we can't centralize the data because we have at least exabytes of data, maybe greater than exabytes of data. So how do we find the 15% of the data tables that drive 60 to 70% of the value? How do we find a way to centralize those? How do we find what are essentially product managers to make sure that those tables are being produced correctly, have customers, have SLAs? So really tactical kind of low-level work. And we can talk about how we're getting at that. But if we get that, if I can leave with that 15% in a good state and an infrastructure that allows the work that your team does to write back into that infrastructure, then I think we're going to have built a virtuous cycle that's going to allow for the growth that we need. I have to believe that, right? I can't solve the whole thing. And I really do believe AI will come for free if we get that part right.
Yeah. And what do you think are what do you think are the biggest hurdles in the way of building this data foundation for the future of the DoD?
Rice bowls. right?
Please explain.
If I give you my data, you, the leadership, have insight into what I'm doing in an unmassaged way, and I can't present to you the view that I want you to see. Like, I'm never going to lie to you, but boy, if I show it to you only via PowerPoint, I can sure put a gloss on it, I can sure spin it. But if it's a live dashboard that you could look at any time you want to, then I'm naked with respect to my data. So I don't think anybody genuinely believes that's bad. If you have a conversation with them, I think people see the real value in that for the organization as a whole. I think the default assumption is, you don't come in here. You're not an expert here. I don't want you to come in and tell me and tell me what to do. And I think there's a lot of those sorts of enclaves. I don't think I'm talking out of school there. I think that's pretty well known.
Yep. You mentioned this thing that I think is really interesting. I want to come back to it, which is, if we get the data right, then AI will happen within the department. Full stop, no matter what.
Yep.
And I want you to explain yourself a little bit, because it's.
But get the data right is huge, right?
Right. Yeah. But if we could just do that, I mean, why are you so confident that AI pops out of that?
Well, okay, so I've been listening to the whole day, and I really enjoyed all of the conversations, and particularly what you and Eric were talking about. This is transforming the world. It is going to transform the world. The demand signal is really strong internal to the department, and contractors are showing up with AI-infused solutions, which is the right thing. So AI is happening anyway. AI is happening massively across the department. The problem, as I see it, is if I were to, well, you're a vendor, so I don't want to pick on you. If I were to buy an AI solution from you, you're going to want to sell me a vertical solution that goes all the way from the data all the way up to the delivery of that value, and that entire pipe will be owned by you. That's what's happening now. And I'm not trying to stop that, because that is the way AI is getting delivered in the department. If we get the data right, then I can insist that you as a vendor, and then actually you as a vendor, play with our data. We can say, this is what we want, this is the data that we're going to provide, and the contract requires you to write your inferences back into our data lake. So getting that right, so the AI is happening anyway. Getting the data right allows me to build a marketplace that I think does AI correctly.
Yeah. One thing that, speaking of contractors, one thing I have a lot of thoughts on is sort of the existing defense industrial base, right? There are this set of companies that have been building our defense technology for decades and decades and decades, and they're very trusted, and they end up working on most of the important projects of the government. Notably missing from that set of companies are many of the innovative tech companies that are from here in Silicon Valley.
That's right.
I think this is a really big problem, that I think we need more of the cutting edge technologists integrated into the defense industrial base, and it's a fundamental issue. What are your thoughts on this? As somebody who was at these cutting edge, Silicon Valley companies, saw what they
Lyft
could do.
didn't sell to the government very much.
Fair enough, but you see what's possible in those organizations, and you also see the problems that the government has.
Well, I want to start by saying thank you to you and your company, because I think you did something that needs to happen much more often, which is to ask, with respect to the DoD, what's the long pole in the tent? What's really stopping us from scaling AI? It's not algorithms. And if you're a big company, it's not data. And if you're an app company, you get all of your labels for free, right? Every one of your users labels your data all the time. But the long pole in the tent for something like the DoD or many of the other companies that you want to service is, how do we get data with appropriate labeling so that it's like, if you give me a cleanly labeled data set, I don't care what the algorithm is, right? I'm going to find, we'll use Google AutoML and we'll just find the right model, right? That's not the problem. The problem is getting that labeled data. So I want to say I appreciate that you're tackling it that way. I completely agree that we need the innovation of Silicon Valley. I think this marketplace I describe allows for that, because the older school primes, who are still doing remarkable value, bringing remarkable value and doing great things, sort of have a lock on this vertical way of doing things. But if we create a marketplace where you don't need as much to show up and play, you can bring your model, use our data, And then when, then I think we're going to open that up. Open it up to smaller companies, innovative companies. And we have something out that's down in Moffett Field called the Defense Innovation Unit.
DIU.
DIU.
Yeah.
And they're specifically trying to match smaller companies with customers who are ready to pay in the Department of Defense. So we recognize this as a whole, that it can't just be the traditional defense industrial base. We really need to actually include innovative companies in academia as well as the defense industrial base, because this is what's going to help America stay on top of things.
Yep, totally. What do you think, let's speak as a broader community, both the tech community and the defense community together, what do you think we're not moving fast enough on right now?
I need really boring things. So can I change your question?
Sure.
I don't think that you need to go faster. I think you need to provide things you're not providing. I need best practices as a service, right? I need to impose upon model practitioners. For the DoD, we're going to have very few model builders. We're going to have people who know, at best, what we need are people who know how to say, I need a model here, and then think about how to utilize that model. But they're not going to know how to label the data, right? That's something that data labeling as a service is something we desperately need broadly. And then we need test and evaluation as a service. I think you're talking to someone from my team later this week, Jane Pinellas, who does test and evaluation for us. Test and evaluation as a service. So if you work for the government and you contract a model, how do we know it's doing the right things? How do we know it's safe, right? So we need the stuff on the left, and we need the stuff on the right, which would be model monitoring as a service. When you ship this model, how do you know that when drift happens, how are you getting the drift back? How are you correcting it as it goes along? And as we talked about, when you ship a model at Lyft or at Google or at Amazon, your customers are always sort of giving you that feedback loop. But how do we build a feedback loop, say for a search and rescue? That was one of your examples earlier,
yep.
Right? How do we design the interface in such a way that labeling is correcting the labeling is a natural part of it, right? So I think the two buzz phrases I'd want to leave everybody with is we need best practices as a service, and we need AI by design. I don't think we bring design enough into to using of models, right? A user that gets an inference from a device, it doesn't say, this is 0.75 confidence, and this is what it means to be 0.75 confidence. It just gives them an answer, and they treat that as truth. That's a real problem in the military context. On the other side, when they say it's wrong, there's not a clean, easily designed way to say, but here's the right answer.
Right.
Right. So it's not really speed I need. I just need a better scaffolding around the model.
I mean, it's a very systems level view that I think you're taking.
Yeah.
It's very, these are the building blocks, these are the fundamental foundations that we need to then unlock huge amounts of innovation, once we're through with this.
It's also a talent management point of view, because I don't think we're going to have the MIT grads and the Stanford grads building models and engineering the pipelines. We're going to have people from all over the country. We're going to have military and civilian, and they're going to have all kinds of experience, and they are at best going to be model usage practitioners and not engineers. So I need the tools to allow them to do the right thing.
Yep.
Does that make sense?